And welcome back to the Constitutionals podcast. I'm your host, Chad White. If you didn't know, this is the premier podcast for the website seatpluscomedy.com. Like I just said, it's a website. Go there. Episode 310 as I scroll through playtimes for Megalopolis. You better believe I want to go see that movie. Is it in IMAX? It is. Is it near me? Kind of. I will do my best to go see Megalopolis. Oh, God. Welcome in. It's playing at a Regal near me, but I don't want to go to Atlantic Station. Go see a movie. I don't be bothered with teens. Oh, it's looking increasingly like I have to go next Thursday. It is the... yeah, we'll get to this episode in a second. There's a noon IMAX showing of this movie. It's not playing at any AMC near me. Oh, it is. But that's today. Is it playing next? I might not be able to go on Tuesday. I have jury duty technically, and I don't want to go. They're taking it out of my AMC. It's going to be at my AMC for 3 days, and then next Thursday it's gone. This is ridiculous. Anyway, episode 310. Here we are. I'm trying to go see Megalopolis. Obviously, I saw Transformers 1 on Tuesday. I was gonna go see The Wild Robot on this Tuesday. I just remembered that I have jury duty. I haven't had jury duty in a long time. Been trying to escape that. Well, I'm gonna do the Liz Lemon approach and be real crazy with it. I'm gonna walk in there with a Princess Leia costume. I don't know. It's our civic duty. Do you remember that episode of the movies? What's the Pauly Shore movie where he doesn't want to leave being a jury? Let's see. Pauly Shore, Jury Duty. It's called Jury Duty. Okay. Yeah, he doesn't want to leave being a jury person because he's unemployed, and that's how he makes up his money. That's how he makes his money, rather. Tia Carrere's in that movie. That's right. Oh boy, she does not age well. I'm kidding. It's all a joke. We're all having fun here. I watched that movie when I was at Bounce TV for work. I had to watch that movie for work. And, this is not interesting in the slightest, but I did have an idea for a movie, and I wrote it down. And, literally, the next 2 days, I received my batch of work, and one of the movies was Jury Duty that I had to watch, and I was like, and then that was my idea. That was Jury Duty. I was like, dang it! Oh my gosh! If you're watching the video, I am wearing a long sleeve shirt. It is not cold here. We are in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, which is a hurricane that did bring torrential flooding to, I guess, the Atlanta area, but not my neighborhood or anywhere near it. However, I needed a shirt to put on because I'm recording this immediately after Late Night Lately. Back to Transformers 1. I had such a fun time with that movie. It was a 11 a.m. showing. At first it was 10:45, and I guess they moved it in between me buying my ticket. I went in only knowing that Chris Hemsworth was Optimus Prime. I didn't go in knowing anyone else was in this movie. I love going into movies blind. It's so fun, mostly because I don't spend time on the internet looking at stuff anymore. I used to be that's like a very intentional thing. I just don't look up anything anymore unless I need some type of information. But I like going in the movies not knowing anything. Like Megalopolis, I know it's a bunch of people who, in Francis Ford Coppola's own words, have been canceled. Anyway, Chris Hemsworth was Optimus. Brian Tyree Henry was Megatron. Scarlett Johansson was Alita 1. Keegan-Michael Key was Bumblebee. They had a lot of great jokes for Bumblebee. Also, this is something that I really appreciate about a children's movie. They curse in this movie. They curse in this movie a lot. They say badass so much. And you know what? It's so great. It's so funny because when it happened, I was like, oh my God, is this movie PG? And they kept saying it. They kept saying different things. And I thought, oh, look at them. I do want to comment on Chris Hemsworth's voice as Orion Pax / Optimus Prime. He did a bang up job. Oh my goodness, it was. You think it could go one of two ways. It could go one of three ways actually. It could go stellar. It could be fantastic. It could be like, whoa, he's doing an impression and it's working. It could be he's doing an impression and it's not working. And it could be, oh, this is bad. It's not working and it's passable, or he's doing an impression and this is bad. And and from now on, I want to use this scale. Chris Hemsworth, Optimus Prime is where you should be as a voice actor, wanting to taking over a storied character. Chris, what is his name? Oh God, now I don't even know. What is his name? Super Mario Brothers movie. Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt Mario. It's not good, but it's passable and it works. It works for that movie. And then Chris Pratt Garfield. Why did that even have to happen? Truly, sincerely. And I will say, I teared up at Garfield. There's a moment in that movie I teared up. It's closer towards the end. But over the course of the movie, you see how Megatron and Optimus were best friends, and then I'll say the first 15 minutes it's a children's movie through and through. The first 15 minutes, it's not until the story starts that it turns into something that is way more digestible and less cliche. But over the course of the movie, you see Megatron get angry and angrier. You see Optimus. He should have started out a little bit angry. Megatron. Anyway, and then you see Optimus become the hero that he's supposed to be. Chris. I'm going to go back to Chris Hemsworth's voice. At first he sounded like Chris Hemsworth, and then for the first 20 or 30 minutes, he started transforming, I guess, into the regular voice, which is, I believe, let me find his voice. Peter Cullen. He started morphing into a Peter Cullen like voice, and it was working. And then at the end, he almost sounded, it sounded like they said, Chris, swallow some ice. But right before the ice gets through your throat, start saying your lines. Truly, it really worked for me. Steve Buscemi was Starscream. Lawrence Fishburne was Alpha Trion. And then John Hamm was, out of everybody who worked the least, John Hamm as Sentinel Prime. He definitely... It was so funny when he would talk about, oh, that's John Hamm. Because I kind of, when you watch a cartoon, I kind of want to just be like, this is a cartoon, and I don't know who these people are. And then at the end of the movie, there are two extra sequences. And I was gonna say something, but I'm not going to, because that would have ruined the movie. Anyway, I'm excited for the future of this. And you know what's also good? This is they didn't have to do this. This is still a part of Michael Bay's Transformers. So this is before, Shia LaBeouf. It's before Cade Yeager, Mark Wahlberg's Cade Yeager. It's crazy. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. It's well directed and very funny. I liked it. All right, let's move on. This comes from Hollywood Reporter, written by Alex Weprin. The New York Times to launch podcast subscriptions on Spotify and Apple. Exclusive. If you are a New York Times subscriber, I will preface this story with this. You still get access to all the New York Times, everything. So all the podcasts ahead of time, as long as you verify, I guess. But The Times will launch podcast subscriptions on audio platforms, requiring users to pay if they want access to archived episodes of TV shows, of podcasts like The Daily and The Ezra Klein Show. So if you're somebody who, there's an episode of The Daily that launched on Sunday, because they do have Sunday episodes that are feature pieces. And if you are somebody who's like, I've been holding on to this episode, or I've been wanting to listen to this episode from a few months ago, then it's time to start listening. Spotify and Apple both offer third-party subscription. Spotify and Apple are both platforms that offer on-platform subscriptions. So if you, NPR, other podcasts, it's much like Patreon. If you want an extra episode of a show or whatever, then you can subscribe on Spotify and then also pay like $5 to listen to extra things. That's not something I would do. I don't want to give. Imagine Patreon, I understand, or paying the podcast producers directly, like Never Not Funny, I pay them directly. Patreon, I pay for Doughboys. But to go to Apple and Spotify and like have like 3 or 4 shows you listen to, and then also know that whatever shows that you subscribe to, they're still giving 40% to Apple and Spotify. It's not worth it. I'd rather give them money directly. Ben Cotton, the head of subscription products for The Times, said, "We see it as a kind of a natural next step to extend our business from an audio standpoint to bring it directly to where you listeners are listening to our shows on those platforms." The podcast subscriptions are going to cost $6 per month or $50 per year. I think this is an idea that maybe kind of seems like, hey, we're stretched for cash. We're looking for money. We're looking at a way to milk subscribers. The Daily is probably, if not the most popular podcast in the world. Like if I go to podcasts, right? Yes, I do have that on my Mac. If I go to podcasts, an app I think I've opened twice. Oh, Lord. Great. And I go to the top charts section and I look at the top shows. There are 3 shows in the top, and they're all essentially news. 60 Minutes has their new Second Look podcast. New York Times has The Daily. And then Wondery has Criminal Attorney. And then besides Joe Rogan and Pod Save America, the rest are all crime podcasts, from Lionsgate Sound, Crooked Media, Sony Music Entertainment, NBC News, Dateline, and The Megyn Kelly Show. Ugh, and Tucker Carlson. A lot of right-wing people like to listen to podcasts, apparently. All right. Well, that is news. Woo, boy, you keep going down. It just gets worse. You see like Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and then you'll see somebody with an American flag. Oh, my goodness. You'll see like Armchair Expert, and then you'll see somebody who, yikes. Anyway, this is why I stick to the few podcasts I listen to. And I would love for journalists to get more recognition. That's why I when I read out headlines to stories, I read out headlines, I read out where it's from, and I read out the journalists. I think that's so important. However, this issue is, I don't know if they're getting paid extra for this. I don't know if the journalist is going to get paid more for this. I don't know if this is even going to be a successful venture for the New York Times. Are people going to want to do this, or are they just going to, and it depends on how much of the archive is not available, because to somebody who listens to The Daily on a regular basis, daily, if not a few times a week, I see right now in Pocket Casts, there are I've archived 2,272 episodes. But it's not like I'm going to need to scroll back all the way to the beginning to see that. You can see a lot of like episodes I skipped over. You can see episodes I half listened to, episodes I whole listened to. But it's not like I'm going to. I mean, I just what I think is that podcasting was free for so long. Podcasting was like this thing where people, the only way they can make money is by, in Never Not Funny's case, by going subscription only and people paying them directly. Like, and that was like that for a long time, or selling merchandise or whatever. And then that was a very condensed area of people. But now people go on tours. People turn their podcasts into TV shows, or talk shows, whatever. And this just seems like another way to monetize that. But we're already listening to, and that's another thing, we're listening to so many ads. Are people going to pay $6 just so they can have access to an episode from 6 months ago and still listen to six ads in the middle of an episode of The Daily? Like, are people going to want that? And yes, you can double down with episodes of this new show called The Interview, which is combining audio interviews and the written interviews from the New York Times Magazine. But does that make sense? Are people going to want that? There's a new daily news show called The Headlines coming. That's going to be a complement to The Daily, but it's going to be shorter. So I assume it's going to be like Up First on NPR. Is that something people are going to want in the long term? Because as we'll see in this next one, this comes from the New York Times, written by Benjamin Mullen. Coming up next on CNN, a paywall. CNN is going to start paywalling its news stories. It's going to be experimenting with this in October, a subscription model. CNN is the leading news source in the world. But the moment that you put this gated garden around this website, I don't see people going to CNN at this point. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what I project to happen. And I'm not an analyst. I'm just some stupid guy with a very loud voice on the internet. But here's what's going to happen. I have a Feedly RSS feed. I have multiple feeds. And one of them, I just have a category as news. Under that news is BBC News, NPR News, The Atlantic, New York Times, New Yorker, Vox, and Washington Post. There's also GQ, but I'd never click on those stories. Of those, I have to click through to, of those, I think all of them, with the exception of The Atlantic, I have to click through in order to read every single story. Oh, and Vox. Looks like Vox. I was like, is it Vox too? The Atlantic and Vox, whatever. I have to click through to read the story. So if I click on the New York Times and then I was going to click on Maggie Smith dying, that article. But if I click on an article, which I'll do it anyway, if I click on this article, I don't get the whole thing. I get the sub lead under the headline. And then I have to click through the story. And that's how I access the New York Times, or I go on the app, or I go on the website. But but what I'm saying is there's so many different ways to get news. If one story is doing, if CNN breaks a story, there's flooding in Atlanta, CNN breaks that story, then I would rather go to WSB, or I'd rather go to Washington Post. I'd rather go to somewhere else where I can access. I shouldn't say Washington Post because that is a pay site. But if I can get my news somewhere else, if I can just go to Google and then go flooding Atlanta now, then that's what I'm going to do. In early October, CNN will begin experimenting with charging some readers for digital access as part of a bid to shore up its business as cable television erodes industry-wide, according to two people with knowledge of the decision. The company is planning a so-called metered model, which will require the site's habitual users to pay after reading a certain number of articles. The same thing that New York Times has done. The New York Times, at one point, I believe, I've been a subscriber for 12 years now? God, how old am I? Yeah, I've been a subscriber for like 12 years. Oh God, Jesus. Anyway, I pay in college. I paid for this. Wait, how old am I? Yeah. Okay. Oh God, no, I was way out of college. Anyway, doesn't matter. Who cares? Um, but these metered paywalls where you get to read 10 articles per month. That does not. Yes, it worked for me to read the New York Times, but also New York Times offers up a lot of other things. With CNN, you still have the linear product. You still have things on Max. So why do, and you probably even have podcasts. So why do this? It's not like your website is getting the most views in the world anyway. It's, first of all, a confusing website. I'm not saying that because I did not get a job as a digital producer. Let's say comfortably in the past month and a half. Did they interview me? They sure did. Did they not respond to my follow-up email? They sure did not. The starting price will be unclear. I assume, this is when I was reading this a couple of days ago, I assume the CNN paywall will be between $3 and $5. I was gonna say $7, but between $3 and $5 because they don't offer much. Again, the CNN website is, first of all, just a catastrophe to look at. There's so much going on. There's so much going on, and it is tough to even like find a story that I'm interested in. But subscription did not work for CNN when it tried CNN Plus like 4 years ago. It didn't. It was not something that was visible. So, or visible that was interesting to people. And what did they do with CNN Plus? They went out and they told Scott Galloway, Kara Swisher. They told so many people, Chris Wallace. They told so many people, hey, let's make a show. Let's bring a show. We'll bring it to CNN Plus. Sometimes it'll air on CNN Linear. And we got this in the bag. And what happened after a month? It went belly up because people weren't subscribing. It cost too much money and they needed it to go. And now they have Max, which Max is a great platform, even though they take away shows and movies all the time that Warner owns, and Cartoon Network shows should live on Max. It's ridiculous. I shouldn't be buying things up on Vudu because, hey, maybe I don't know when Adventure Time is going to be on, if it's going to leave Hulu or Max at some point. Also, here's just a little side note. Disney Plus is great. I am more than willing to pay that $27. I think now it's going to be $27 for Disney Plus family, the Hulu and ESPN Plus, because on Disney Plus now, and even though I'll never watch Cartoon Network shows on Disney Plus, but you can access Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon shows on Disney Plus. It's crazy. Right next to shows like Hercules or Pepper Ann. You can get Steven Universe and Hey Arnold or Rocko's Modern Life, whatever. It's crazy to me. That's how Hulu used to be. I miss Hulu. The subscription wall is one of the first major business initiatives for Mark Thompson, who's a now current CNN chair and chief executive, who's had the job for almost a year after Chris Licht was nicked. Thompson said in a memo to employees this year that technology would allow CNN to deliver journalism that readers will pay for, and later said that the company would try out a paywall. I don't see this being something that people want and are asking for. What I do see, though, is, let's go back to the podcast discussion. People want news in a quick, digestible way. So that's why, as much as I dislike the New York Times making people pay for archives for the daily, but if someone can spend 30 minutes of their drive to work or driving their kids to school or of their run or just making breakfast in the morning, listening to the Daily or watching CNN This Morning, a show I used to work on, I never had anything to do with the Daily. But if people can do that and kind of, just laser in on doing something else and have that in the background, that's what they're going to do. But no one is going to actively say, I got to listen to that episode of The Daily from 15 months ago. I have to go on CNN and get this one story that's not available anywhere else, which, hey, it probably is. It's news. I offer up this to CNN as an alternative. Podcasts. Leverage Max as something. They already have, Kate Baldwin doing 5 things you should know on Max. Let's leverage that. Let's do small shows. It doesn't have to be something big. It can be something small. You could have Brianna Keeler, out there hosting a 10-minute show that is just a let's dive deeper into one story from today. And we'll interview one person that we didn't get a chance to do on the afternoon show. Hey, let me get Anderson Cooper to do a 20-minute podcast talking about that only covers, or Christian Amanpour to do a 20-minute podcast that only talks about business, or Richard Quest, or whatever. I used to work there. That's why I know these people. But this will not do well for them. This is, and I will boldly say it, this will not do well for them. And going back to the New York Times podcast subscription, they'll see a pop, and then that'll probably be it. Because we're in a digital age where you need to make money, but also people want to save money. And if they're going to spend money, they're going to spend it on things that they care about more. And it won't be listening to old episodes of The Daily. It won't, and especially subscribing on Apple iTunes podcast or whatever. And it won't be subscribing to CNN online to read an article about, the top 5 reasons why you should be wearing snow boots in the fall. Okay, now let's go to Deadline. This is written by Nelly Andriva. Paramount Plus's communications team dissolved as layoffs hit streamer hard. And follow-up, Lynette Rice over at Deadline. Longtime CBS exec Tina Koyanagi Rosener and her 6-person team among hundreds cut at Paramount Plus. We saw a slash in the workforce for Paramount this past week. This is the first wave. This is the second wave. This is the second round of cuts. Because we did see layoffs before, but now this is the second round of cuts, and we're seeing some faces, some big faces in the world of Paramount. One was Jeff Glor, who is an anchor / reporter correspondent, and he works. I believe he did the weekend show for CBS News. Yeah, I've been talking about CNN for so long that I didn't know which platform I was on. We also saw senior vice presidents Morgan Seal, Amanda Carey, and Diva Kehoe lose their jobs. Last week, Aaron Calhoun, who was who oversaw the Department of Communications as EVP, head of communications, Paramount Streaming, and Showtime, and cross-company publicity. That entire team's been just gutted. Mostly, it looks like 15% of the workforce has been cut, or this is the plan. Wow. And these are a lot of veterans with the company. What an insane thing. It's so crazy. These companies, they sell for billions of dollars. I'm talking about, I understand, if Skydance and Paramount's deal has not gone through just yet, but they sell for billions of dollars. Sherry Redstone is going to make so much out of this deal of selling to Skydance. And yet we just can't seem to keep people employed at these companies. Warner Brothers, we saw a lot of people lose their jobs. Disney, we saw a lot of people lose their jobs. And even still, we're years past Warner Brothers and Disney having merged with Discovery and Fox Studios, respectively. Co-CEOs George Cheeks, Chris McCarthy, and Brian Robbins wrote to staff this week that they're aiming to achieve $500 million in annual cost savings, with layoffs a key component in hitting that target. You don't want to see people lose jobs continually. And I'm somebody who works in this industry, and it is just a shame to see this. And it is getting, it gets worse and worse and worse. And at some point, a lot of these companies are going to be skeletons of what they were and are. And it's just not fun. It's not fun to see, and it sucks. And yeah, I mean, there's really not much more to say about that. I wonder where Paramount Plus will be a year from now. I wonder where the streaming platform will be a year from now. I saw an article yesterday that said that CBS is going to air the season premiere of Yellowstone, season 5, part 2, I believe that's what it is. This November, on the same day that Paramount Plus is going to air it. So if they're both going to be airing at 8 p.m., one's going to be, I assume, highly edited, the CBS version, while the Paramount Network one is going to more than likely be pretty dark and dirty. And then, that's going to be great for them, because they're going to be able to go to advertisers and say, hey, this is going to be a huge event, especially for linear, for cable, and for broadcast. You're going to want to buy some time from some ad time on this. Then I assume it's not going to be available on streaming, because Peacock owns the rights right now to Yellowstone, which is a stupid move on Paramount's part. But they needed that cash. Same thing for the South Park. They made a stupid move. If they had all of South Park, whew. But I think they have like 4 more years on that. Warner Brothers owns it still. Anyway, it's it makes me think that, CBS All Access, when it launched, it was something so different compared to Hulu, which at the time was free, and then Netflix, which at the time was $10. and then the others, which were HBO Go, which was tied to cable, and the other just regular streaming apps, like a VH1 app or MTV app or whatever. That was all tied to cable. And CBS All Access was the outlier, where they said, we just want CBS stuff. We're only going to put out CBS stuff. That's it. And then they managed to get live TV, and then they managed to change their name to Paramount Plus, and then they managed to have all these different live channels. And they were first out of the gate, and they were doing well, and they had this leg up ahead of Peacock and HBO Max and the rest of these platforms, and Disney Plus. They had the leg up ahead of all those, and then they plateaued, and now they're out of fighting with Peacock for last. Out of all this, they're fighting with Peacock for dead last, and it's a shame to see. And so in a year, what will Paramount Plus be? Yes, I can access it on Amazon. I can access it on Amazon's Prime platform, the Prime Video platform. I can subscribe to it on Apple TV. And at in some juncture, that does put them ahead of Peacock, because Peacock, you got to download that app, and that app is bad. I don't like that app at all. Although every time I go to watch Big Brother or Tulsa King or Frasier, I have to force close the Paramount Plus app, but that's probably a Chromecast with a Google TV thing. In a year, is Paramount going to be a Paramount Plus going to be around? Is it going to merge? Is it going to be sold off? Is it going to be a shell of what it is now? In the same way that Max is a shell of what HBO Max was. Listen, if you like what you heard here, head to the website cpluscomedy.com, where I talk to famous people sometimes. This week, I spoke with Shane Brendan, who is a comedian, and he's friends with Kyle Kinane. He has a new album out called Either Way Pretty Funny. And we have just an excellent, candid conversation about fatherhood and comedy, and he's very down to earth and it's very fun, and I enjoyed it. If you want to see a video version of that interview as well as of this show, you can head to youtube.com/cpluscomedy, where you can get all of that goodness. You can also subscribe to the other podcasts, Late Night Lately, the Late Night Show, and LinkedIn Logs, the Jobs podcast. Videos for those on youtube.com/cpluscomedy. Subscribe to those shows wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook @CPlusComedy. Follow me on those platforms @ChadBlackWhite. Thank you so much for listening. I've got this in the bag. We'll see you later, and goodbye.